Hello, this is Georgina Rose,
This is Nike.
And this is Anthony.
and welcome to Magnolias and Magic. In this episode, we're going to be talking about social acceptance. So, I think when a lot of people get interested in the occult, a worry they have is how will other people perceive me when I become an occultist? Whether you're a witch, pagan, occultist, whatever, for most people and in most environments, unless maybe you live in Portland or something, being an occultist is not the norm. Most people don't know a lot about this stuff. Most people, when they think of paganism, think of like Midsommar, or like historic records, right? They don't realize that this is like a thing that people do. I remember when in my small town where I grew up, like I didn't know any other occultists. More recently, there have been some people who've gone like Wiccan, but like people aren't very educated. Most people know about Wicca, but that tends to be most people's reference point, though now, of course, it's becoming more and more popular. Obviously, this is a conversation that's ever changing because our perceptions and culture ever change. I remember the first time I had a discussion about this about a year and a half ago, it was actually a different climate. And if we were having this discussion in the 1980s, 1990s, like those would all be very different discussions. So this is going to be present for how it is now. And of course, we come from very diverse backgrounds and diverse areas. So we all have varying experiences. No matter where you're from, like you're probably going to have a different experience with this. If you're a minor, you're going to have a very different experience. If you're an adult who lives on their own, you're going to have a different experience. Whether you're going to date someone or someone's going to be your boss or they're your parents, they may react wildly differently. And in my opinion, in certain places, you don't really need to talk about it at all, like there are certain places where you're going to want to talk about it, certain places where you don't. And as an individual, I'm very open about this. Most people know, though, of course, I don't wear it on my sleeve. I don't tell like every single person I meet. I've had varying responses. Some people think it's super amazing. Some people don't care. And some people have definitely been.
Some people thought you were in a cult.
Yes, I'm a cult member. That's one. I've had some very interesting conversations, to say the least. And so you're going to have a lot of mileage that will vary. So we want to talk about all the nuances of that, our own experiences, and, everything that goes along with this. So I first think we should define a term. This term I see being used less, but I remember when I got into the occult, everyone used it. The broom closet. So what does that mean? What's the difference between being in the broom closet and out of it?
So my understanding is basically just it's whether or not you tell people that you're into paganism, new age stuff, spirituality in general, witchcraft, whatever title you use for it. Essentially, for the most part, non-Christian, non-Jewish, non-Islamic faiths. The things that are sort of out of the mainstream. And there was also, I haven't seen it as much in a while, but there was also some controversy about whether or not it was also offensive to the LGBTQ community to use the phrase. I've spoken about this publicly before, but we can also go over it again. But Anthony, what are your thoughts on the discourse about the phrase coming out of the broom closet?
I think it arose organically, if I remember right, like around like when I started first practicing, like in the mid 2000s is when I first heard like coming out of the broom closet anywhere. But like there's a fundamental difference between your spirituality and something like your sexuality. Like one, obviously, you're born with and you can't do anything about, and the other one is something that you choose theoretically. That being said, though, your spirituality, because that's where the argument usually arises a lot when like queer people talk about the phrase coming out of the broom closet being offensive. It's that queerness is something you can't change, and so it's like robbing some value or robbing like some impact from something that the queer community has coined for itself. But as far as spirituality itself goes too, like as a queer person, I also think spirituality is something you shouldn't fundamentally have to like change about yourself just because other people don't like it. And it can have deep impacts to like your psyche, your personal life, like every aspect of your life can be impacted by it the same way that queerness can. And so I understand like the usefulness of having that phrase coming out of the broom closet. Like it can be very impactful, especially for young people, to start sharing your spirituality and opening up to other people's critiques. And so I do think it has value, like I said, in certain cases, but just I just wish people, not wish, but I hope people are mindful about it when they use it, that is a phrase that has been adopted from the queer community with very specific ramifications attached to it.
Yeah, and I feel pretty much the same way, where I don't care personally. I don't really care for it. Not necessarily for the queer reasons, just it's not a phrase I think is as useful. But I think that there is value in having something because, like you were saying, there is impact in either like forced spirituality, like being forced into Christianity, forced conversion. There are ramifications if you don't follow that social norm of being in a sort of normative religion. There are impacts up to like abuse and getting kicked out and all sorts of awful ramifications for telling people about your non-normative beliefs. Even just telling people you're atheist sometimes can result in getting kicked out. But we're talking about specifically paganism, witchcraft, and that whole thing. So I do see some of the comparisons. I If somebody specifically says I'm uncomfortable with this phrase, I definitely won't use it around them. I just don't care personally.
Yeah, that seems to be most people's opinion. That seems where the community consensus is. I find that the term is mostly used around younger people. Like, I think in younger spaces, the term coming out of the broom closet is a lot more commonly used because when you're a minor, versus when you're an independent adult, whether or not you tell people has a very different level of ramifications. Like, if you live with your parents, you're a lot younger. Like, I got into the community as a teenager, right? If you tell your parents who you're completely dependent on and you're like 16 that you're interested in the occult versus if you're, 25 and you have your own apartment and, you tell your family you're into the occult, very different ramifications. Because the worst your like family you're not dependent on can do is just like treat you weird. You don't live with them. There's not a lot of risk there. Whereas if you're living at home and you're completely dependent, there's a lot more risk. Like personally, my family is accepting of the occult stuff. My dad just kind of said that he was happy I was religious to some extent. Like, I remember when I was a teenager, they knew I was into weird stuff. Like, I had a lot of weird books. I read a lot of political philosophy and all this stuff. But I never told them the full story because, I thought that they might react poorly. Like, if I said I'm into Aleister Crowley, which my dad's association with that is the Ozzy Osbourne song, like there's a lot of misconceptions coming in there. So I avoided saying everything until I was more independent. I have a good relationship with my family and they were fine about it. I could have definitely told them earlier, but I think like if you're really worried about it, you should just kind of wait to give the full details. You can just say you're exploring your spirituality. Like when I meet new people, I actually tend to avoid the word magic because I find that people get really thrown off by that. Like I'll avoid the word Crowley. I'll just say, I'm into this thing called Thelema. It's an alternative religion. It's all about like, connecting to your will or whatever. Like I will avoid sort of key words that tend to freak people out. I've just noticed like if you say magic, you say witch, you say occult sometimes because some people don't realize that occult and cult are different words. Like there's certain words that I consider like trigger words that I actually avoid when I'm talking to non-occultist because I think like that is good and I think you should test it out, right? Like say like I'm into spirituality and see how they react first. I don't think you need to like, come in like guns blazing and be like, I am a Thelemite. I don't think that's necessary and I don't think that's really effective with people.
I follow the teachings of Aleister Crowley, the wickedest man in the world who eats babies.
Yeah, like maybe don't do that.
If you were a true Crowleyite, you would do that because Papa Crowley would want you to. Yeah, I think that especially for minors, we've had this discussion in different servers before on social media before. I think that for minors, it's definitely a different risk. I was very lucky. I was raised not as an atheist, but without religion. It really wasn't pushed by my mother, thankfully. But when I initially found paganism in high school, very early high school, she thought it was weird, but she never really said anything about it. She let me buy some of the stuff, like I bought candles and little candle holders and a book. But, she just sort of let me explore it. I was very lucky that I was never in any real danger, but I know that I have friends and I've met people online who, when they were a teenager or at this time they are currently teenagers, they've said, like, my parents would kick me out if they knew I was into this. They're super, super radical Christians or whatever. Like, they're very extreme about these beliefs and they think all this stuff is satanic and they would kick me out and I would have nowhere to go. And then they ask, like, so how can I practice in secret? And I always have to tell them, look, if you're going to be in danger in some way, if you are in danger of getting kicked out, if you're in danger of abuse, don't practice. And it really sucks to have to say that to somebody, because we all obviously know how exciting it is to first get into this and to want to explore it and to really want to take control of your life through magic and witchcraft and all of this. But you can always come back to it in a few years. And, there's a lot of this impatience of, but I want to do it now. And, I always say it's not going anywhere. And it really does suck to have to tell somebody so eager to start and so eager to learn to put it off, because, it's disappointing, and maybe they would lose steam, and maybe they won't come back to it later because they weren't able to start now when the fires were fresh. But your safety is more important than starting witchcraft, because you might not come back. I would rather you be an atheist than to put your life at risk, put your health at risk, put your safety at risk because you want to practice witchcraft.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. No, and I'm in a slightly different boat than either of you, I think, because I was actually raised in like a super duper conservative Catholic household, and so like, yeah, everything was Satan. Harry Potter was Satan. Charmed was Satan. Like,
oh, well, that level.
yeah.
Oh, I
Later
heard
on,
about
Barack
the kids
Obama
whose
was
parents.
Satan. Yeah.
Oh my god, I heard about the kids whose parents were like, Harry Potter is satanic, even though it's a fake,
That
it's a
was
fiction
me.
book. Oh, I
Yeah.
don't envy that.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. Yeah, so my experience was I grew up in a very suppressive household in that way. I was raised by my grandparents, who they're both boomers. They're both very based in traditional conservative values, just aside from the Catholicism, and then the Christianity just made it more exacerbated, I think. But growing up was weird for me because I found occultism like very, very young in life. Like my grandparents are very superstitious. Like they both come from like folk. They both have like folk traditions. Like I hesitate to say like folk magic, but like my grandpa's Hispanic, and so like his whole family, they do like egg cleansings and they pray to saints and like all that kind of work. And then my grandma's Korean, and so she has like all of that like Asian based pseudo paganism like in her experience as well. So they're both like very superstitious, and so like despite the traditional views on Christianity and religion, they were always very interested in like the evil eye. My grandpa always would talk about the evil eye. Like they'd always talk about spirits and ghosts and like seeing hauntings. Like my grandma is like a Korean Baptist, which is comparable to like what is the word for the American church? I think it's Pentecostalism, like the people who like talk to snakes and like they speak in tongues at
Yeah.
church and like all that crap. So like she does that kind of like crazy Christianity. And so like very, very untraditional in that way. So I was exposed to alternative forms of spirituality like that young, despite them probably trying to keep me away from it. And so with that, I did my own research. Like I explored, I think, like Buddhism, Hinduism, like a bunch of different religions, because for me it was all based in like my queerness, because like I also figured out I was gay very young, and that was also a very big point of contention. And
Same.
so yeah, so that led me to break away from all of it pretty young. So like I said, I explored a bunch of different religions. I eventually landed on Wicca, and that was just everything in a box of chocolates to me. And so that was my little entryway into paganism. But like all throughout growing out, I had to figure out ways to practice like subversively and like keep it hidden from my family. Like there were multiple times when like I would set up an altar in this really cute little like nook or whatever I would find in my room where no one would see, and then someone would like be on their way to find it and I'd have to tear it down and throw it all in the trash can like super quickly. And like I've burned books before, like so people couldn't find them. Like I've had to fucking like, yeah, no, it was super fucking wild. And so with that, like I think that's probably a big reason why I identify as a witch today, because like my craft has always been very subversive in that way. But like retrospectively, to echo what you're saying, Nike, like I completely agree with you. Like if you are in a situation where like it could potentially be dangerous to your life or your livelihood, like that's a risk you have to balance. You have to figure out if it's worth, like, is it worth your life, is it worth your safety, or is your spirituality more important? And like I can't tell you one way or the other, but I can tell you like if you are in a situation that is dangerous, you have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, well, I practiced in secret when I started. So I got interested in the occult when I was at boarding school. So when I was like 14, I started at boarding school. So I like left home at that age, but obviously like, I was very dependent on my parents. But I lived with a roommate, and so when I started practicing, I actually found out my roommate I was living with was raised by like Gardnerian traditional Wiccans, which
Ooh.
that's that was very interesting because I was interested in essentially like very edgy stuff when I started, and so she was actually horrified.
When you started? You're not edgy now?
Well, I was always a very I was interested in a lot of very fringe ideas in general. I explored a lot of out there stuff. And
You're saying "were" like it's past tense.
But yeah, so I've always been interested in kind of out there things. And so when I got into the occult, she was actually kind of horrified by me because she was a Wiccan, but she was like thought that I was like messing with the stuff you aren't supposed to mess with, right?
Mhm.
She was like open to it, but she was like really weird about it. She actually knew what I was doing because she was raised by Wiccans, so she was like educated. And so I actually practiced in secret from her because I didn't want her knowing what exactly I was doing. And so,
Wow.
yeah, because I remember she even made a sign, like she's like, stop summoning demons in our bathroom, like we had
Oh
this
yeah.
argument, we had, like this like big fight where she's like, the left-hand path is bad. And it was like this whole like blowout. It's really funny now in retrospect. And we actually had some really weird spiritual experiences together, and that dorm was haunted as fuck. Like, we like had this super haunted dorm. We fucked it up really bad because I didn't really know what I was doing. I like did a lot of stuff that I was like definitely not qualified to do. And so like I made some mistakes and whatever. But I actually hid from her. So I would like keep my material separate. I would like do shit in the bathroom when she was asleep, or like go out into like the woods on campus and stuff. And as someone who did a lot of fuckery in secret, I've had a lot of people ask me, because I've been open about this. I've talked about some of my boarding school crazy stories on quite a few podcasts. I think I did it on yours a little bit. I went into some of it. Did I? On your
I think you did. I think the biggest thing you talked about though was you talked about sneaking off to the woods to do a dedication ritual,
Yeah.
and then you also talked about summoning the goetic spirits in your bathroom.
Yeah, so like I have quite a few crazy stories from that period of time because I was very reckless. I'm actually a lot more careful now.
Mm-hmm.
But I get asked a lot because I've talked about this stuff. How did you keep stuff in secret? And I want to first of all be like, I did not do a very good job at it. I got caught like multiple times by my roommate. Like if I was in some life or death Christian family, like I would have been super caught. First of all, I did a shit job hiding things. In general, I'm not very good at sneaking around for anything. And at the same time, I also feel very ethically weird about it. Because it's always like minors. The majority of my audience are people in their late 20s, but occasionally I'll have like a minor DM me and they'll be like, hey, how can I hide this? And obviously I don't respond because I feel very strange giving people tips on how to hide their religion from their parents. That feels very ethically weird to me. I know there's a big controversy about Silver Ravenwolf, who did this in some of her books. She like gave people tips on how to hide things from their Christian family. And I know if I was a teenager, like I was hiding shit, but I feel very odd. Like I've had a lot of requests, like do a broom closet video, and I feel very weird about it. And I don't know if I, feel comfortable giving like tips to people who could potentially be in, because I was never in a real risky scenario. I was going to have an argument with my roommate.
Yeah.
That's not life or death. I feel like if someone is in some like super strict family and they want like tips on how to hide things, I just don't feel comfortable giving that. Like it feels like I'm playing kind of a gambling game with their personal experience. And I don't know. I feel very strange about the whole thing. No hate towards anyone who's given like broom closet tips or whatever. I just personally feel weird.
I made a video about it.
To be honest, like being like how to hide things from your parents. I don't know.
Well, no, I made a video about it, and I gave a very strong caveat right in the beginning. If you're going to be in danger, do not do it. Like I was really, really hardcore about it, and then moved on. And it was like, if your parents are going to be just a little bit weird about it, or if you've got like roommates who generally are just going to be kind of strange, or you just want to keep it sort of private, it was more of that. Like I think that there are reasons, because I feel really weird. Even I'm out to my entire community. Like everybody I know, one, knows that I'm a witch, that I'm a pagan, whatever. And honestly, too, a lot of my community knows that I do this. Like they know exactly what I do here, and I have conversations with my IRL friends and acquaintances about this stuff. But, for a long time, and even still with that, it's this very like private thing for me. And so it's a lot of like, I don't really feel like having everybody discover everything I have without my consent. So, like, if they come over
Yeah.
and I show them my tarot decks, that's one thing. But if I have, like, a roommate, I don't really want them stumbling across my altar and touching things on it. So I keep things a
Yeah.
little bit more low key. You know, it really just changes depending on the scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some of this also ties into this compulsion to tell people. We feel really
Yeah.
compelled, at least in America. You know, a lot of our takes are always going to be American centric. Here, there's sort of this compulsion to tell everybody what you're into, what you do, the fact that you are in fact a witch or a pagan or whatever. And I think some of it comes from our sort of Christian culture of like, you should tell everybody you love Jesus. This like, you must tell everybody you're Christian.
Needing to like witness to everybody.
Yeah, witnessing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the role that social media plays in some of this. And we have to acknowledge that there is also this compulsion from social media compounding on that to share every part of your life, to share every intimate detail about who you are and what you do and what you believe and what you think and how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And those sort of work together to make people feel like I have to tell people, I have to tell the world,
Yeah.
versus, you know, I would say in a lot of non-witchy spaces, there's less of that to a degree. Like if you're a Christian, yes, there are some people who put in their social media bios, you know, proud
Christ is
Christian,
king.
or just the fact that they are Christian, like Christian mother, whatever. But a lot of people who are Christian, you would never know based on just their social media because they don't post about it. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily, hello, you don't necessarily have to do it because you know it's personally, I think it's nobody's business what you
Mm-hmm.
do in the safety of your own home if it's not hurting anybody. You know, if it's not hurting anybody or yourself, there's not necessarily a need to go around telling everybody what you believe and what you think because it's meant to be, most importantly, a relationship between you and the divine. It's not meant to be
Mm-hmm.
you, the divine, and everybody on the internet.
Well, I think
Yeah.
it's a cultural shift. I remember when I was a kid, I was always told there are three things you never talk about at a dinner table: sex, religion, and politics. And if you
Mm-hmm.
read a lot of these older occult texts, you see a lot of emphasis on oaths of silence, the idea of keep silent, you know, all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But I think in modern culture, we've moved away from that. Like now, like my family, you know, we used to follow that rule. Now we like scream about politics at dinner tables when we all have like meetups, right? Like I think in general, people have become a lot more open about these things that used to be private.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think in general, we talk a lot more about our personal beliefs publicly than people did like 10 years ago. I think it's a wide cultural shift, and I think there's some pros to that. Like, I personally, I love an intellectual discussion. I find them a lot more engaging than, you know, small talk. And obviously, like, I'm pretty open about what I believe. But I think there is a virtue to keeping some things to yourself. I think like not every conversation needs to be about this stuff. I think it can make our lives a little unbalanced, you know, and it puts a lot of pressure on people to have all their beliefs defined because for a long time you're going to be seeking and you probably won't really know exactly what you believe. And so I think it's honestly just a cultural shift we've had, which I think comes with a lot of pros and cons. If you don't want to tell people you're an occultist, you don't have to. If you want to, do it. But it's up to you. I think in general, sometimes we're a little too open about what we think when we could just be, you know, discussing other things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of it too, I agree with you. I think it's a cultural shift. I think part of it has to do with, I'm not going to even pretend to guess what socioeconomic historical trends created this, but like, especially, I saw it with the millennials, like my generation, and then especially now with Gen Z, like, they have a very high emphasis on like self-acceptance and like acceptance within your community and like finding like chosen community. And so I think a big part, like it stems back to the phrase like coming out of the broom closet. Like I think a big part of the urge to tell other people and like share your spirituality, I think some of that has to do with like, for one, like internal validation, and then also getting validation like externally from your community, which can be like a good thing if you're trying to build community and the community itself is healthy, but it can stem into like egomania. It brings up the topic too, like back to the like taking your craft online, like engaging with the community in that way, like through social media and sharing your spirituality online. I could see how that would be helpful in combating that, especially like talking about like loneliness or depression that younger generations deal with. And I think I think where the conversation needs to go, like as a community, where the conversation needs to go is healthy ways to do that, like healthy ways to engage with the community versus just like not word vomiting, but like spirituality vomiting yourself like all over the internet, basically.
the internet's such a different way to engage with the community. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like engaging
It's
on social,
literally never been done before.
yeah, it's a new thing. And I think being an occultist on social media and being an occultist in your local community is very different, and you're going to be exposed to very different things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, like the conversations people have in person and have online are actually even different. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's some overlap. People are thinking about different things. Like it's a very different world.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And I think a lot of people feel pressured to share their craft on social media, especially young people, because when you're younger, like your way into the community is the internet. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to show up to like your local full moon circle. You're going to be on Discord or Instagram or something. And so the
Mm-hmm.
way these people connect to spirituality is through social media. So they feel pressured to share about it. And when you, look, to be honest, I'm going to make this as a hard take. Once you put your craft and your face together on social media, people in your real life will find it. You
Yeah.
know, like if you, it happened to me, it'll happen probably to you. If you
Mm-hmm.
put your face, so if you don't show your face, you're probably fine. But you know, once you like put your name and your face with your occult content and your occult practice, that like outs you to your entire life for a lot of people. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like you're gonna have to run the risk of people finding it. So I think
Yeah.
that's something you should really consider.
Well, and the other thing too is like you have to consider like your future employers who like could find that, like universities you might want to apply to, or like any like I know of cases where people are like not allowed to work with, like this is in more conservative parts of the country where I've heard this, but like people who aren't allowed to work with children if they find out that you're pagan, like through your social media or anything like that. And I don't remember the specifics, but there was that incident a couple months ago where like that girl who worked at a Panera Bread like lost her job because she got outed as like a pagan to her boss.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of real life considerations to have. I feel comfortable personally because the jobs that I've had are very progressive, and so I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to worry as much. Like the place I used to work for had a lot of Pride merch that they would make during different times of the year, so
Yeah.
it felt safe enough. But there is definitely like a difference. I also like, you know, you're mentioning like going physically to circle versus doing stuff online. I'm weirdly much more private if I go to an in-person witchy event compared to online, which feels kind of reverse. But online, there's a little bit of that like distance safety
Mm-hmm.
versus standing physically in front of somebody. Like the circle that was where I used to live was a lot more love and light. If you do baneful magic, you're not allowed to come here kind of people. So
Yeah.
I had to be a lot more quiet about certain parts of my practice, and I couldn't tell them that this is what I did. I couldn't tell them any of my online stuff because they would
Mm-hmm.
see what I did. And they're not people who would be engaged online, but you know, the people who ran the circle, I was just like, I can't be as open with you guys about what I do versus online. I can just be like, look, we're free to disagree, but there's no consequences necessarily. Like, you know, if I'm a moderator or an admin in a community, or even just like a regular member, look, if the community is against it, I'll go find a different community online because it's really easy. But finding
Mm-hmm.
a new space in person is a lot harder, so you do have to be a little bit more careful. And you know, there's the physical one-on-one person risk that comes with being physically in front of another human being. It's all very, very different. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
much more private with people who are physically in my space. I think some of it's also like energetically, but that's just like a me thing. Yeah. Well, I was just having this conversation with somebody recently that I still don't feel fully like I haven't fully processed like what it was, one, just to like have my life changed spiritually, religiously,
Mm-hmm.
from just being vaguely interested to being much more public about it just with my friends and being public about it online. Like I don't feel like I've fully internalized the difference of who I am now and how I am perceived, because I still see myself as some dumb 19-year-old kid who's experimenting with these things, and I'm just like, I'm just some rando in the community. And the reality is I'm 26. I
Mm-hmm.
know more than I give myself credit for. And you know, it's weird to think of yourself not as a pillar, because I don't want to be egotistical about it, but as
No.
a figure that is looked to for information and advice and for clarity. You know, somebody that if you're struggling, you can ask, hey, how did you deal with this? You know, even if it's just like if you're trying to figure out a new spell or learning astrology or whatever. It's very strange to step into that because if you didn't expect to be there, it's much harder to internalize, because I never expected to be here nearly 2 years later.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
No,
I think.
I had
Oh,
no
go
idea.
ahead.
No, you go, you go, you go. I talk too much.
No, I was just gonna say, and the thing I think is like it's very counterintuitive to try to step into that role too, especially like on social media, just because like teaching in and of itself is like a difficult skill to learn, and then like teaching something as niche and like strange as like the occult is also a difficult skill to learn, which like our elders for the last like 50 to 100 years, like they have been building that within in-person spaces into like orders and traditions and frameworks. Like it took generations to come up with like real tangible effective ways of teaching our spiritual traditions to people, and then all of a sudden now we have the internet and social media influencers and like online occultists, and we have to now take that tradition and figure out a way to, it sucks to say, but like effectively like sell it to people like on the internet. Like you have to learn how to actually teach people who want to learn, and then if you're going to do it as a business model as well, you have to learn how to incorporate capitalism into that. Like it's a like I said a few minutes ago, it's a beast that like nobody has had to deal with ever in like human history before. So like I think I've heard that from interviewing so many like occultists now, like I've heard that over and over again of like trying to take your craft and put it online for the consumption of other people is like one of the most head trippy things you can do nowadays.
Oh yeah, and like teaching on the internet versus teaching in person is wildly different, because when you're on the internet, you have to realize there's no barrier to entry to seeing your content. Like in an order
Mm-hmm.
system in Thelema, the way that Thelema is traditionally taught is you initiate and you go up these ranks, and they teach you more as you go along. So you're not teaching the like beginner stuff to people who've been it for a long time, but you're not teaching the advanced stuff unless you have this background. Whereas on the internet,
Yeah.
someone can just click on like your advanced videos first. They don't have to, follow that order. So obviously that changes how you do it. It changes everything, because I don't feel comfortable putting like a fucking gun in the hands of some new practitioner who doesn't know what they're doing. I'm not going to do that. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
all very different. I just think as a rule, if you're not comfortable with everyone in your life knowing you're an occultist, don't put your face on the internet with it. I'm
Yeah.
just going to be blunt. Like, I think that if you're not comfortable with everyone knowing, I wouldn't, talk about it on the internet. I know it can feel more comfortable to tell people on the internet, but it's riskier than doing it in person, because, like there's certain people in your life you probably don't want to know you're an occultist, like your boss. You probably don't want your boss to know,
Yeah.
especially because, like your boss, your grandma, like those are the type of people tend to not want to tell, right? Pretty much
Mm-hmm.
everyone tells their boyfriends or like their husband or, stuff like that. But, bosses, the teachers of your kids, stuff like that, most people don't want to tell them that. And when you're online, you do run that risk. I think in general, like there's certain people in your life, and this is a different conversation, but I think we should get into it. There's certain people in your life I think kind of have to know. I think, and this is, I've had people tell me this is kind of an extreme take. I think your boyfriend or your husband should know.
Oh, I agree.
Mm-hmm. I
I
agree
don't
with
know why
that.
that would be an extreme take. I mean, the assumption is you'd be living with them, they'd be sharing in your life. If you plan to get married, often it's a religious ceremony. So if you wanted to have like a pagan themed hand fasting versus
Mm-hmm.
a Christian church marriage, you'd kind of have that conversation. And if you
Mm-hmm.
haven't told them you're a pagan and you want to do a pagan hand fasting and they want to do a Christian church wedding, you'd kind of have to tell them, hey, this is what I want, or I
Yeah.
don't want to be in a church for this reason. And, you know, they kind of have to know. Like, I wouldn't be able to hide this shit from my partner. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I have my like mini altar right here. The big altar is in the living room in front of everybody and everything. There's no
Mm-hmm.
way I could hide this. I do the podcast from the other room. I couldn't hide this from him. Never.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat too. And the thing is, like, maybe like once upon a time, like when I was like a teenager and like I was dabbling in the craft, I could see like being able to hide that from someone I live with. But like now I'm at a point in my life, and maybe this is just me, but I'm at a point in my life where my spirituality bleeds into almost every aspect of my daily life. And so, like, yeah, there's just no conceivable way I could hide it, like, from my boyfriend, who I literally spend like almost all day every day with. And I think the nuance of that discussion is like whether your partner has to like be okay with it or like be into it, or like what kind of exceptions you should make on your boundaries versus like does your partner have to not necessarily practice with you, but like I've been in relationships before where I've tried to share that with someone, and it has created this weird tension where like they basically think I'm crazy, but like they just humor me because like they like all the other parts of me or stuff, which that's toxic as shit. But like
Yeah.
it's just so it's so weird. It's so weird to try to navigate that in a relationship if you're not completely confident in yourself and in
Oh,
romantic relationships. Like,
well, I dated a guy who I didn't tell I was an occultist to, and I think you guys all know that I'm definitely, I wouldn't call myself a hardliner, but I'm kind of close to that. I'm not exactly like I light a candle once a month type person,
yeah.
So I was dating this guy. It was when I was like 18 or 19, and we were together for like 8 months or something, and I never told him I was an occultist the entire time.
Bold
Oh
move.
And
no.
I deeply regret that, to be honest. And it's so funny because afterwards he actually like figured out I was an occultist, which that's a long story. And he like texted me and he's like, "Why didn't you tell me this?" It's like I
Mm-hmm.
would have been fine with it. I don't know why you were so weird about it. Because he knew I was spiritual, and I would always say I was going to meditation group whenever I would like go to rituals and stuff. And so like
Yeah.
it was pretty obvious I was hiding something, and I had to like go out of my way. I never lived with this guy to like keep it private. And like it was just it didn't work. It didn't make sense. And so ever since then I've been like, there's no way I can hide this from a partner. Like that's not gonna happen, especially because eventually, I'd like to live with someone, I'd like to get married, I'd like to have kids. So obviously, like, I don't think you can hide that from, someone you're a partner with. I think
Mm-hmm.
parents, it's hit or miss. Like, I don't think you need to tell your family. I feel like I'm close to my family though. Like, family, I would say would be next on your list to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Well,
after that, like close friends. But I don't think you need to tell like your boss, you know,
mm-hmm.
your coworkers. Like that's where I'm like, I don't think they need to know.
Mm-hmm. Well,
But
I
I think
think when it. Oh, I'm sorry.
very
Go ahead.
close. I think people very, very close to you should know. Like people in the core of your life. Yeah, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I fucking never shut up.
No, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Was like I think with friends and family, it's like a personal decision, but like it stems from like you want to be able to extend that trust to them. Like you want to believe that like they will accept you no matter what, and like if the spirituality is such a big part of you, you want to be able to extend like the chance for them to validate you in that way. And so like I get the urge. Like as a queer person, I get that urge. I understand that urge very well.
I told my parents just because it was more because I don't live with them, I'm not dependent on them, but it was more hassle to think about like
How to
lying to
keep it
them about
secret.
it. Yeah. Especially once I started doing things online, more that than anything else. Because I was practicing for a long time before I was telling them anything. But when I started doing things online, it was more of a hassle in my mind of like lying to them about what I do for work and the exciting thing. Like, Georgie and I were in The Familiar, the magazine. It's it's sad in my head because I have a better relationship with my parents now that I'm an adult. It was a sad thought of like I wouldn't be able to share things like that with them. I couldn't come home and be like, wow, this amazing thing happened. Let's celebrate together. Instead, I just have to be like, things are fine. Work is
Yeah.
fine. It's boring. So like that was just a personal choice for me, but that's a lot more circumstantial based on doing things online. Or like if you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be a professional tarot reader or professional astrologer, those kinds of things that sort of go with our community. That's where it sort of becomes a little odd. And when you want to make it your career, it is a whole nother beast about like who you tell and how you tell them and what you do with that information. It's definitely very weird.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on those accomplishments, I mean, if you get involved with a real life coven and you go through initiations and you're really proud of that stuff, you want to be able to share that with the core people in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like when I was not telling the person I was seeing that there was like a part of me that they didn't know. That was the big
Yeah.
thing that bothered me. Like a core part of my humanity and a core part of who I was being held from someone that I really cared about.
Yeah.
And that felt just wrong to me. Like I regret it. I wish I had told them. I think you should tell the people you're really close to, unless they're gonna have a fucking shit reaction. Don't do it then. But I think the people who are really close to you should know you. They shouldn't,
Mhm.
be with a stranger.
Mhm. I agree.
I found a lot of benefits of being open because as soon as I told my general community, because I made like a Facebook post and I was just like, "Hello, everyone, I'm a witch and here's what I do." So I was really just like, "Let's tell everybody at once." And I actually had a great reaction. I think I've spoken about this before, where some of the people I knew that I never would have guessed, they commented on that post or they DM'd me and they were like, I am actually Baby Witch, and I would love to pick your brain sometime. And so I've been able to have a new form of relationship with some of these people. I've been able to have new conversations. I've been able to help people feel less alone because if, part of our community thinks, oh, you're a little bit crazy, a little bit weird to this person, well, them and I we can have a conversation about this stuff and neither of us feels weird about it. We can feel totally comfortable. Us having this conversation could help make somebody else feel comfortable. If somebody is curious, they're able to now come to me or this other person as we're having this conversation and ask questions. So it helps to open up those avenues to people who are curious but unsure. It definitely does give me some looks from some of the people that I know who are, I don't want to say they're not accepting, but they think it's really weird. There are pros and cons to telling people in your life about it. It's helped me a lot to have this deeper connection, but there are definitely people who our relationship has changed in the other way where they don't speak to me as much anymore. Not because they're afraid or anything. They just think I'm a little bit cuckoo. And it's a risk that you have to take. Like, are you willing to risk those relationships getting a little bit weird in exchange for being open about what you believe and the things that you want to celebrate in your life?
What are you guys' advice for bad reactions? Because I think that's kind of something we should finish with. Because I've had some bad reactions over my time. I think the funniest bad reaction I've ever had, I gotta tell this story, is I told someone I'm an occultist, and they asked me what cult I was in. Because the O, they just thought I said, "Hi, I'm a cultist."
Yeah.
And they weren't like negative. They were just like, "Oh, what cult did you join?" And I was like, I don't know how to respond to this. I went on a first date with someone and they asked me my religious beliefs and I was like, I'm a pagan, and they immediately went to like Scandinavian black metal and they're like, what are your thoughts on Varg Vikernes?
Oh no!
Burning churches. Like they immediately like, your thoughts on Varg? And I was like, can we not? That was like comedically bad because I was so confused. I was like, this is like the worst first association you have. Like, honestly, I think that's worse than thinking I'm a Satanist. Like, it's not on burning churches and homicide. And I'm like, this is taking a turn in this cute little restaurant in Brooklyn.
I think it depends on the severity of the reaction, honestly, and you have to be kind of prepared for the worst options and then just deal with the better ones if they're better. Worst case scenario is, if somebody in your community, if your boss finds out and they try to fire you, depending on the religion, they may or may not be able to. Like, if the Lema is not a government-recognized religion, they have a little bit more power to, versus if you're Wiccan, Wicca has done a lot for us for religious safety. But there's the extreme reactions of, like, could you be fired? You shouldn't be able to get kicked out. Like, of households, if, like, of a landlord situation. Like, they shouldn't be able to kick you out for your religious beliefs, I don't think. So
I think that's illegal. I think it's also illegal to fire someone for their religious beliefs, but it can happen.
Yeah, it can happen. It's a whole thing. Panera is an example. Anyway, the more extreme risks of that, of losing friends and family members, like you kind of have to be prepared for some of these people to really, really go extreme. And so generally my advice, even for the slightly less bad reactions, is test the waters. Bring up, like, I have a friend who's really into astrology. I have a friend who's really into tarot. I was reading online about some of this stuff, about meditation. I didn't realize, you can lie, I didn't realize that pagan religions were coming back. How do you feel about that? I think that's pretty cool. I think it'd be cool to learn about some of that. Like, come at it from the, I'm trying to educate myself on other people's beliefs and see how they feel about that. Like, I'm trying to learn about this. What do you think about that? And if they're like, that's the devil, not to talk to them about it. And you go from there. I really think testing the waters is going to be really important here. This includes family too. If you're unsure about family and you want to see, you can bring these up as, I heard about this, I saw this, one of my friends, whatever, an acquaintance, whoever.
Oh no, I literally did that when I tried coming out to my parental figures when I was like 14 or 15, I think, like after I'd been practicing for a couple years. And that's like literally exactly what I did. I sat down with my parents one day and I was like, hey, like, my friend just told me about this crazy thing that they found in a book. It's called Wicca. And like, this is what they do. And like, their parents are totally okay with it. What would you guys do in that situation? And they were like, yeah, fire and brimstone, send her back to the church. But like, it was good to know. It's a good barometer.
It's a great smart way to do it. I mean, that's better than just taking the plunge.
Yeah.
You can honestly gauge people's reactions pretty clearly, I think, based on like leading questions, or like avoid, like, once again, explain your beliefs without using like trigger words like magic, witch.
Yeah. It's
You
good to
know,
know how to talk about it, like how like a normal person would discuss it, like academically. Like I usually say that I'm into like, or at least before I gave it, I don't really give a shit anymore, but when I did give a shit, I would call it like alternative spirituality. Like I'm exploring alternate forms of spirituality.
Oh, the really lightweight way is to talk about meditation.
Yeah,
Like
I'm really
meditation
into
and yoga, you start
meditation.
there.
Yep.
that's like the safest.
Yes.
Those are the ranking of safety: meditation, then astrology, then tarot. Then I'm a Wiccan. Then up 20 levels is I work with the Goetia.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
And if
I
you're
think
still following, then you know they're probably good to talk to.
yeah. I think for me it's yoga, meditation. I think yoga's a lot safer because you can just say that you're doing like exercise. So yoga,
Yeah.
meditation. You could talk about what's it called? Smelly aromatherapy.
Yep.
You can talk about aromatherapy.
That's
Smell
what I used
therapy.
to say. I used to tell people I was into like herbalism and like herbal healing because to explain
Yeah,
away like all
herbal
my
remedies.
jars. Mm-hmm.
hmm you could talk about like collecting flowers. You think they're new, like learning about folklore.
Mm-hmm.
You could say you're into mythology and you want to learn about mythology. Greek mythology is a really easy one. It'd just be like, I think Greek myths are cool and I want to
Mm-hmm.
read more because you can pass it off as like fiction.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's like Wicca and spell work, and
Mm-hmm.
depending on how serious you are about astrology, that gets tricky really fast because you can be
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm a Gemini because I was born in early June, versus what I do, which is like perfection years and zodiacal releasing
Yeah.
and these transits, Mercury retrograde, and
Mm-hmm.
You're the
it becomes
astrology
woo.
girl.
Yes, it will. It becomes that stereotype very quickly for like astrology and tarot, like divination becomes a very hard jump from like this is fun to oh you're serious. Like they
Yeah.
can pass it off as a joke at first and then be like oh no like
You're like
that's a
really into this.
yeah that's a really tricky way to walk, and so that can be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Astrology is easier to pass off than tarot because astrology, they're just like, whatever. For some
Mm-hmm.
reason, people think tarot is way more like satanic than
Yeah.
astrology is. So that's
I think it reminds people of Ouija boards.
yes, I
Mhm.
agree.
Which Ouija boards are just not, they're not satanic either. Hate to
A
burst
Luigi board?
a Ouija board.
Wah, Wegboard.
Yeah, well, Ouija boards they're not satanic either. So my final thoughts are gauge your situation and work up slowly to telling them the full truth. And there's certain things that I don't really think you need to tell anyone. No one needs to know the nuances and super specific personal details of everything you do. Just do what makes sense for you and don't feel like you're living a lie.
Short one this week. Ooh.
I know. I'm getting better.
Uh,
I'm healing.
my you're healing. My
I'm being healed from my pain.
my final thoughts are don't feel compelled to tell everybody in your life about it. I personally have the belief that religion and spirituality are honestly fairly private things. And as much as I share online, there's a lot more that I do not share because I think so much of it really is just meant to be between you and the divine, whatever that means for you. And it's okay to keep it private. You're not lying to anybody. Even if you're way more open in the beginning, you'll figure out a balance for yourself as time goes on because it starts this new and exciting thing and you want to share it with people. But as things simmer out and it becomes a more lifelong path, you'll find your way. So don't feel bad if you feel like you're oversharing or undersharing. That balance will find its way. And honestly, if anybody's demanding to know your beliefs, it's none of their business. It's not for them to know. It's your beliefs, and if you really have to, you can just lie.
Yes.
Lying is based, actually.
Lying is based, actually.
We advocate lying on this show.
Yes.
I think my final thoughts are gonna be if you feel the need to share, how do I want to phrase this? I don't want to give people bad advice. Basically, your spirituality is your own, And our spirituality in particular, when I say our spirituality, I mean like paganism, occultism, like the general community umbrella. Our entire flavor of spirituality is extremely stigmatized, and there's a long history of that stigmatization. It's still stigmatized to this day. So if you want to be open about your practice in any capacity, it comes with some kind of risk. And so just my advice is to be aware of that if you do choose to be open about your craft. With that, make sure that you clarify within yourself if you are doing it to seek validation, if you're doing it to seek community, if you're doing it just for the fuck of it. Just be clear about why you're doing it when you take on those risks, and make sure, just like anything else in your craft, you do it with intention and mindfulness.
Patreon. Let's go patrons.
I know, I let you lead.
You sure did. I was waiting for you to cut me off because that's normally how we do it. So
I pointed at you. I summoned you.
So if you want to help support the show, we have a Patreon. We also have an Instagram, Magnolias and Magic Pod, I think. The link should be in the bio description. We'll figure it out. But if you pay $10 or more, we get to say thank you by name to you personally and everybody else who does it. So I would like to say a super duper special thank you. No, this is not me stalling for time. Don't even worry about it. I'd like to say a special thank you.
There's nothing to see behind the curtain.
There's nothing here. Amy, Barry, Evan, Jay, Janine, Jonah, Alejandra, Doitsu, Jessica, Kat, Lee, Leo. Oh, Leo, you changed your name. Okay, Leo, I appreciate that. Lisa, Marcello? Could be either one.
Sounds wrong.
Marcello does sound wrong. I'm going to go with Marcello. Marshall, Mike, MK Scorpio, Nauseated, Neon, Nico, Nicole, Ree, the Lady Ghost. I love that name. Victoria. Oh, this is a new one. Abstract Melon. Love that. Alexa. No! Never mind, I went too far. Haha, Victoria was the last one. That's why it changed back to A. I will cut that. Thank you. Please, Georgina, cut that. So, thank you guys for... Thank you guys for supporting us. If you leave that in, we get 2 extra thank yous. Thanks for the support. We really appreciate it. You should follow our Instagram. I haven't been keeping up with it lately because life has been hard, but I will be getting back to posting fun clips and things where, we have a good time.
And if you want to support the show, we have a Patreon. You get extended shows, pre-shows, your name read off, which is, I guess, the most exciting one. And extra
because I fuck it up every week, that's why.
And extra shows every Sabbath or so. And if you want to find me, I'm Georgina Rose or .darling, DAAT. I am on Instagram, YouTube. I'm on so many platforms that I have to think. It's like a mental exercise. Instagram, YouTube, Twitch. I stream with Nike twice a week. Telegram, Twitter. I am TikTok. Yes, that's all the platforms I'm on, I think.
Listen, this is way easier for you to say. I have a link tree. All my shit's there. No. Speaking of, I have a link tree. All my shit's there. Actually, it's on my website because I have a website and that's pretty cool.
Yes.
I will be posting October moon information coming up pretty soon here, so keep an eye out for that. Patrons, you will of course get that early as you always do. Password protected special articles, very fun. I'm Warrior Witch Nike pretty much everywhere, or Warrior Witch N on Twitter. If you want astrology Twitter, I am Astro Witch Nike. I know what my name is for my other account. Follow me places. I do YouTube. I'm pretty cool. I haven't done YouTube in a month.
You can't remember all your platforms.
I get the main ones, okay? I'm around, and you should go consume my content and enjoy it, and subscribe to me.
And if you want to connect with me, I am not nearly as cool as my co-hosts. I do 2 things. And so I have Twitter and I have Instagram, and they are both at Anthony the Witch. And if you want to check out my own personal podcast that I produced earlier this year, it is called The Living Grimoire, available wherever the hell you find this podcast too.
And this has been Magnolias and Magic.